What's up guys, Wyeth here, and this video is going to be about 3 ego mechanisms, and these ego mechanisms that I'm going to be talking about, they're not mechanisms that you will find in mainstream psychology like in your college introduction to psychology class or your high school psychology class. And I remember Sigmund Freud, he had like 12 basic ego defense mechanisms, and I covered those 12 mechanisms in another video I made about 4 or 5 months back, so I'll leave a card for that above. But this video is about 3 ego mechanisms that are not in mainstream psychology, but nonetheless they do exist, and they attain especially to the spiritual path, because this channel is all about spirituality, the spiritual path, and discovering truth. And while all of us may have different goals on the spiritual path, no one's journey is the same, no one's destination is the same. Many of us don't even have goals at all, but a major thing that all of us have in common who are trying to discover truth and are on the spiritual path is that we're trying to make sense of this reality we're living in. We're trying to make that divine connection. We're trying to make that connection with Source. We're trying to discover what's true. We're trying to discover who we really are and why we're here. And a major mechanism that can hold us back from doing that is our ego. Our ego is the self-survival mechanism. It tries to persist as a self, so it will deploy various mechanisms to make sure it persists as an ego, to keep it comfortable, to keep it alive, to keep it going. But this mechanism, it can hold us back in many spiritual endeavors, and that's why these 3 mechanisms are extremely important. So without further ado, let's get into these 3 mechanisms. Okay, so the next mechanism is ego backlash. And basically what ego backlash refers to is kind of your body, your psyche's, just everything about you's tendency to return to baseline, to maintain homeostasis. So when you're on the spiritual path, when you're really diving deep into this work, you're inevitably going to have a spiritual high. You're going to have a peak experience where you have crazy insights, crazy realizations that seem life-changing in the moment, whether that be like a psychedelic experience or like a Vipassana retreat you go to, 10 days straight meditation, or some sort of Kundalini yoga awakening, whatever it is, one way or another, you're going to have a spiritual high. And what's going to happen oftentimes after the spiritual high is, you're all the way up here with these crazy insights about like love, God, unity, the self, the ego not being real, all this sort of stuff. You're going to be up here, and what's going to happen is your body, with its natural mechanism to maintain homeostasis, it's going to come back down again. And this might be a trigger like a sort of dark night of the soul experience. It might be more mild, but you're going to come back down again, because your ego, your psyche, it has all these ingrained habits, ingrained thought patterns, ingrained behaviors, ingrained beliefs that are just so ingrained in you, because you went your entire life, or so much of your life, acting that way and thinking that way and believing that way, that it's not so easy to just completely let go of those beliefs when that spiritual high you had made you realize that a lot of those ego mechanisms, a lot of the stuff that your ego throws at you is not in alignment. It doesn't go away so fucking easily. So what's going to happen with the tendency to maintain homeostasis is your ego is going to start throwing stuff at you. I remember one thing my ego threw at me was after some peak experiences I had in psychedelics a while back. I started really questioning whether what I experienced was like even real, or whether I was like delusional, or like if I should keep going with this spiritual path, or like what the hell is even happening, or if I should just go back to normal. And it threw all this stuff at me, and it really made me question what was going on. I remember it kind of triggered a dark night, which lasted a week or 2 of deep depression. But it threw all this stuff at me, and looking back on it, it was amazing. Kind of just thinking about how I couldn't really control any of what was going on. Obviously, you can't control your thoughts, but it's like, looking back on it, it's like it was just throwing stuff at me, and I was just kind of going along with it, wondering what the hell was happening. But it really is just the trying to maintain homeostasis, because ego, it's a survival mechanism. It wants to persist how it is. It wants to persist as it is. And when you have this spiritual high that takes you to crazy insights that are utterly mind-blowing, it doesn't last long. Your ego is going to start throwing stuff back at you again. So it inevitably lead to ego backlash. I want to thank Leo Gura from actualize.org for making me realize that this is a mechanism. He has about an hour video on his YouTube channel about it, which is really good. You know, it's very in-depth, much more than here. But with ego backlash, you know, you need to recognize that it's just the ego mechanism. You can't control it. It's just what happens, you know. So if you stay true to your path and you keep going with your spiritual practice like meditation and whatnot, if you know in your heart that this is true and I just need to keep going with it and my ego's just throwing me stuff because it's the fucking ego when it does the type of shit, you stay true to that and you're inevitably going to get through that spiritual low and you're going to return to baseline, and your baseline is going to actually be even higher, because my baseline now is even higher than it was before. So you just got to stick it out. Definitely check out other videos about ego backlash to learn more about it. But without further ado, let's get into the next one. Okay, so the next mechanism is idealization or fantasization. And you know, we all have ideals in mind about who we want to be, how we want to act, how life should be lived. You know, an ideal is kind of a model or a standard or just a kind of a benchmark for perfection and excellence in your life. And while it's great to have goals and have ideals in mind, because, you know, they give us a sense of direction in life, they give us meaning, they just make life worth living in general. But the problem arises when we become very attached to our ideals, we become dominated by them, and we just cling to them, and it, you know, starts to become a thing where we're kind of, you know, like a rat on a wheel, where we're chasing an ideal. We're just chasing and chasing and chasing, and we never feel fulfilled, because, you know, what an ideal is, you know, having an ideal in mind, it's the ego projecting into the future a vision of yourself that is better, perceived as better than you are now, which simultaneously implies that your state right now is not adequate. It implies that you are not whole, that you are not enough right now as you are. And this sets you up to feel empty if you are clinging to your ideal, like, I have to have this thing, I must be this way. That sets you up to feel empty. And what happens often in life is, you know, we have a goal, and when we attain that goal, you know, a big goal, like a 2-year-long goal that we finally actualized, what often happens is when we attain that goal, we get there and it's like, okay, I thought this thing that I had set out to do would fulfill me, and now I don't feel much different. I feel the exact same. And now that I'm here, I don't feel any different. I still feel the same. I still feel empty. I still feel like something's missing. So then you set another goal for yourself, an even higher ideal. The ego projects an even higher vision for itself into the future, and you're back to where you were before. You're feeling empty. You're not feeling whole. You are chasing the cheese. You're the rat in the wheel chasing the cheese. And when we're talking about spiritual work and being on the spiritual path, this is the antithesis. You know, being dominated by ego is exactly what we don't want to do. We're trying to discover truth. We are trying to make that connection with the divine. And a big part of that is realizing the operating system that has run your life, the ego, which tries to persist as a self and is constantly trying to upgrade itself through chasing ideals and clinging to certain things to upgrade itself. That mechanism is, you know, keeping you from, you know, discovering truth and realizing your true nature and really progressing on the spiritual path. So I want you to just think, how are you being dominated by your ideals and your fantasies? I really just want you to think. Sit down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long you want to, and really think about, what ideals am I clinging to that are, you know, holding me back from this spiritual work? What kind of desires or fantasies do I have that I cling to and I kind of am unconsciously going towards in life, and it's setting me up to feel like I am not enough right now, to feel like I am not whole? Just think about that. You'll definitely find so much just floating around in your psyche. And another thing I want to say is that often, you know, grandiose fantasies can be indoctrinated into you by culture, and you kind of operate unconsciously on it for a very long time, or even your entire life if you don't become aware of it. I think a big kind of fantasy that might be implanted by culture is the idea of destiny. Oh, it's my destiny to become this, or to attain this, or to become this person or this way. It's my destiny, I must do it. Because it's like my entire sense of being, I must do this. That's one example. Another example is, you know, the ideal of being the hero, being the superhero, saving the day, being this absolute best, being the absolute best person ever, that sort of thing. And then if you get lost in that and when you don't live up to that, of course it sets you up to feel empty because you haven't lived up to the ideal that you've set for yourself. And like I said, it's very important to have ideals in mind because it gives life meaning and direction. But what I'm proposing here is that, the more grandiose ideals, especially when it comes to spiritual work, those are not necessarily meant to be attained and are not necessarily supposed to be taken so seriously. They're more guidelines to direct you, but clinging to something that's very grandiose and something that is not in alignment with the spiritual work that you're trying to do, there's no point of going for that and letting that dominate your thoughts. So what I'm proposing is that you reframe how you view your ideals. I am proposing that you really sit down with yourself and discover just what kind of fantasies and ideals are dominating your experience and how that's contributing to you not progressing on the spiritual path, and how that's contributing you to not feel whole, to feel this sort of emptiness within you. Because when you project so far into the future, the further your ideal is away from your current state, the more empty you're probably going to feel, because whatever your ideal is, that's how you want to be, that's how you want to feel, that's how you want to act. And when the further you are away from that, that's going to set you up, going to keep you locked in your ego, and you're not going to make much spiritual advancement. So basically what I'm saying here is, don't get lost chasing the cheese. Don't be the rat on the wheel who's going nowhere and just being in the same state all the time, always trying to chase something that is unattainable. Because when we're on the spiritual path, we're trying to discover truth, like I said, and chasing the cheese, clinging to ideals and fantasies, that's going to hinder us a lot on the path. So that's really all I wanted to say for this one. So let's get into the next one. All right, so the final mechanism is distraction. And that is distraction from the fact that you don't know who you are and why you're here and what your place in the universe is and what the universe even is at all. All you have is your direct experience. We've all just found ourselves here spontaneously. We don't know why. And the only thing that we can confirm that exists is ourself. And we develop this ego, we develop this mechanism to protect the self, to keep the self surviving, because that's all we know to be true. That's all what's in our direct experience. And deep down, if you did some self-inquiry, if you were honest with yourself, you would realize that you have no idea who you are and why you're here. You have no fucking clue. Yet many people can become so lost in the dream that it really feels like they have a sense of who they are and why they're here, because they create meaning for themselves. They create meaning for their ego. And all of this is just a distraction, because they really do not want to, question these existential questions and really get to the bottom of it. They just want to do whatever feels good for their survival, do whatever feels good for their ego. And all of this is distraction. Most people go their entire life and never question this. They'll just do whatever their ego guided them to do in life. They'll believe whatever they were raised to believe their entire life about religion, and they'll go about life thinking that's the way, thinking that's true, thinking that's the answer. But like I said, if they did honest inquiry, they would come to the fact that they don't actually know. They don't actually know anything, and everything they believe could be completely wrong. So if you're here in this video at this point, you're obviously very interested in discovering truth, in discovering your true nature, in being on the spiritual path, and diving deep into this. Because, I can't tell you why you do it. It seems like for me at least, it seems like a divine will is kind of pushing me towards this. I don't really know, but I want answers, and I'm just like you. I found myself here and I don't know why, but I want answers, and I have woken up to the fact that I've just distracted myself my entire life from this, and I don't know who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm here. I've filled the void with content that makes it seem like I'm not in a mysterious world that have it all figured out, but recently in the past couple of years I've realized that I don't. and that I want to discover what's true, and I'm willing to do anything for that. So I've been very honest with myself, and I've realized that I've avoided many things that are important that I pursue if I want to keep going on this path, but my ego doesn't like it. And I'm honest with myself. I have very certain ego attachments that I am not ready to let go of, certain outcomes that I would like to happen. I have ideals that I cling to. There's certain experiences I want to have. And I'm honest with myself about that. And I'm conscious that I am distracting myself from this fact that I don't know who I am and why I'm here. But being honest with yourself is the first step. So what I want you to get from this is I want you to just ask yourself, how am I distracting myself? How am I coping with the fact that I'm completely clueless about who I am and why I'm here? And what the universe is and what reality is? What am I doing to just cope with that? You'll probably come up with a lot of answers pretty quick. And you might be honest with yourself. It's like, I don't want to do that questioning. It feels very threatening. It feels very uncomfortable. I don't want to go down the spiritual path. And if you think that way, that's completely fine. I completely understand you. You know, it's hard work. But if you're going to keep going with it, it's important to realize that in many aspects you have distracted yourself and you are avoiding confrontation with these existential questions. So the first step to that is honesty. I'm not really going to tell you what to do once you've figured out how you're distracting yourself. That's something you have to figure out for yourself. That's something I'm still figuring out for myself. So, I'm going to always be giving future updates on my journey and my path. But there's a lot of things you can do. And like I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do because the path is unique to each individual. What each individual wants out of the path is going to be different. So that's really all I wanted to say for the mechanism of distraction. Just realize that everything you're doing is a distraction from the fact that you don't know. You want money, you want a nice house, you want a car, you want a hot girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. All of that's just filling the void with things that your ego wants and likes. To make this dream, this mystery of reality, feel not so bad, feel not so mysterious. So I just want you to realize that. That's all I had for this video. If you wish to support my work on Patreon, I do have some tiers on there. It would be great if I had some support. That's really all I wanted to say for this video, guys. Have a great day and peace.